talk about the Livable Big Sky campaign. On a mail-in ballot due May 6th, Big Sky voters will be asked to decide on key initiatives that have the potential to impact Big Sky's future for generations to come. Those include renewing the resort tax as a vital funding source, as well as the cold smoke housing bond, the community park bond, and the proposed property tax levy from the Big Sky School District to support teacher housing. The Chamber's role in this, as well as in any important community issue, is to set the table with the key players to help educate and to share resources. Tonight we'll be hearing from representatives from Resort Tax, the Community Housing Trust, BSCO, and the Big Sky School District. Following the presentations, we'll have a Q&A moderated by Jack Reaney with Explore Big Sky. You are the key partners in this conversation. So again, thank you all for being here, for those of you in the room and online. And with that, I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you everyone for joining us here at Ballots Brews. Does everyone have a couple of things? First off, whether it's an alcoholic or non-alcoholic drink, cheers to Big Sky, and thank you for joining us at Ballots Brews, where we're here to talk about some important upcoming ballot measures for the community of Big Sky. As Megan mentioned, I'm Danny Bierschwal, and just want to say thank you to you all who, maybe this is your first time, maybe this is your 18th time hearing this presentation, but we're so appreciative to see some new faces in the room and hopefully get some really good questions. What you can expect out of tonight's presentation is all three parties that are part of the Livable Big Sky campaign, as well as the Big Sky School District, will be outlining all the ballot measures that you'll see here in May. And at the tail end, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and Mr. Jack Reaney is going to come on board and in his home space here. You know, it's not trivia, but certainly glad to have Jack on the team here as we move forward. So you're going to have an opportunity for questions. This is a live streamed event. I assume it will be posted online through Explore Big Sky as well. And with that, when we do get to questions, Jack, what do you want them? You want them over here in the whiskey barrel? Is that what I was hearing? Whiskey barrel, appropriate for Ballots Brews. Okay, you have libations. Do you also have a couple of handouts? I'm going to use a few of these as we move through our presentation today. This is probably the most important one, which will be going out to all registered voters here in the Big Sky Resort Area District. With that, let's go ahead and get started. To start with, curious from the folks in the room, what does a livable community look like to you? It means different things to different folks. I'm just curious, throw out some key words that may be a livable community to you. Affordable, I like it. Recreation, I like it. Well, with that, very invigorating. Here is what the Livable Big Sky campaign is moving forward with, to really attempt to outlay what the future of a livable Big Sky could mean. And it's really the culmination of a series of years that have led up to this decision. Resort Tax has spent the last 2 years updating the Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP, making it an actionable document that will help guide large-scale community investments. And through that process, 97 projects were vetted and then determined for need, funding gaps, and shovel readiness. Some of those projects don't have anything to do with resort tax, but they're large scale in nature, $1 million or more in capital investment. Some of them, like the fire station number 3, which is going in up at Spanish Peaks, were acquired through that environmental scan, but not necessarily part of anything with resort tax, more just a note for the community that these large-scale investments are happening, and in that particular scenario, they have a funding source through an RID, but helpful for the community to know. Some of the projects that were identified, and 2 of them specifically were identified to be critical priorities that required a bond to secure necessary funding. These bonds require voter approval to move forward. With that, the 3 bond measures that we are talking about and what we will be educating about for the vote today are in front of you. First off, these are all independent ballot measures that each organization is helping to, in some form or fashion, support, and the Resort Taxes Authority is allowing for these to move forward with ballot measures and questions. And you know, there are 3 of these ballot measures. At one point we were talking about 2 ballot measures. There was the discussion around bundling some of the ballot measures. In fact, that was a legal decision that had been made from our lawyer. She went back and grabbed her pencil and pen and were able to figure out a way to pull these apart, because we heard very clearly from this community that you wanted the ability to be able to vote on these projects independently. So thank you for your feedback. We have heard you, and these are the 3 ballot measures that are moving forward from the resort tax. And while all 3 of these logos in front of you do represent a specific entity or the project that is moving forward, they are all done under the authority of the Resort Area District. In addition to this handout that once again is the mailer and you can use to follow along here in this presentation on the interior, we also have a couple of other items in your packet. And this one specifically is tied to the resort tax renewal ballot measure, has FAQs on the back and an info or an overview on the front. The Cold Smoke Neighborhood Housing Bond also has a 1-pager. So does the community park modernization. And last but not least, we're a week today, as of today, for your last date to be able to register to vote. I don't care what way you vote in May, I want you all to vote. Your vote is your voice. This is the most democratic process that we have, and that's what we need help sharing. So, when you see your ballots, what's this going to look like? It's not going to be simple little tiles that you can actually click on and say yes or no. It's going to be a for or against vote that you'll find on your ballot. And Tammy, in fact, I think has some of the sample ballots in the back. Tammy, if you could raise your hand or yell. You're too short. Tammy's right there in the back. You can see her jumping up and down. The way the ballot language is actually going to read is, shall the Big Sky Resort Area District be authorized to issue bonds payable, blah, 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 and it goes on for like a paragraph. What's really important for you to understand is that your for vote is outlined here in your little nifty trifold, and your against vote is also outlined for you. And again, the registration is the most important piece to ensure that you are active as a registered voter. There are some registered voters that are inactive. If you haven't voted in a recent election, maybe even the last election, you may actually be an inactive voter. So go back and check, because this is a mail-in ballot, which means it will arrive in your post office box or wherever you receive your mail. And without making sure that you're active, you're actually not going to get that ballot in your mailbox. So with that, let's dive into just a very brief overview about the resort tax. Just a show of hands, how many of you in the room are familiar with the resort tax in Big Sky at least? Wow, that's a lot of folks. Thank you for your active engagement. I have found that there are more around the community that are not aware of what the resort tax is, and it's critically important. It's been around for 30 years, and over $121 million since our inception back in 1992 have been redirectly invested in Big Sky in our boundary, and it helps to fund a variety of very critical services in our community. Can anyone in the audience name another community that has a resort tax? Whitefish, Red Lodge, correct answers. Craig, West Yellowstone, both correct answers. Great, that's pretty good. Good job, everyone. We were actually up in Helena, and have been up in Helena. I don't normally wear a suit jacket like this. Was up there today, in fact, advocating on a couple of bills. They're very important to the community of Big Sky. One of those is SB 260. I'm not going to dive into that right now, but one of them is, shoot, David, what's the bill number? HB 172 that passed? HB 172 was a bill that was introduced by Senator Fern. We also had a parallel bill here that had the same purpose, and that was to introduce workforce housing into the definition of the 1%. A simple way of looking at it is it helps us to utilize and manage our debt far more effectively by moving our 1% in the event of the passage of this bond. 1% would take on a majority of the debt that would be coming on board as we talk about these bonds. Give a shout out to a few of the board members in this room. We do have an elected board of 5. I've got Grace Young in the room, who is on the elections committee. Thanks, Grace, for joining us. We also have, as part of our elections committee, Michelle Konjorski. Is Michelle in the room? No, that's okay. We also have Kevin Germain, Sarah Blechta, and John Zirkle as the remaining 5 board members. Also on our committee are joining us members of BSCO. We've got David O'Connor with the Big Sky Community Trust, as well as Housing Trust, as well as Becky Brocky, and then we've been partnered with the Big Sky Community Organization, Whitney and Montgomery, and Madeline Fair, as well as Liv Grubau. So very happy to be working with some core community members here as we move through this. Resort tax in all reality is a sales tax, for those of you that don't know, on the luxury goods and services that are predominantly used by tourists. And at its core, it's designed to provide you property tax relief. In FY25, government funding was $15 million that was contributed by resort tax. And without the resort tax, either those services would diminish. Think about things like fire, transportation, water and sewer core services. Without the resort tax, either the services would diminish or the property taxes would increase. And as a reminder, the resort tax is paid by the consumer and collected and remitted by the businesses. And I should have started by thanking the Waypoint, a collector of the resort tax. Thank you very much for hosting us tonight. Let's pivot over to the ballot initiative for the resort tax specifically. Again, you have a one-page handout. Hopefully you have one of those, and if not, you can get one of them as you're coming into the room. The renewal would allow us to continue to fund the annual grant cycle, which is the predominant funding source for many nonprofits and government entities in our community. It helps to support the themes of a livable big sky, a thriving community, affordable housing, accessible public spaces, essential services and infrastructure, and health and well-being. Without the renewal, none of these bonds will happen. Pivoting to the next slide, what is a bond? Think of a bond like a mortgage. The current resort tax term is set to expire and sunset in 7 years, which is not enough revenue to meaningfully borrow against and still fund grants. Renewing the resort tax allows us to extend the term from expiration date of 2032 to 2065, which would allow us to give a better window to be able to work from and more road for us to be able to actually borrow against those future collections. Think of a bond similar to you as you would a mortgage or a loan, where you're paying principal and interest against a term or the life of that loan. And the resort tax in this case is the funding source that is going to be used. Bold, underline, exclamation. This is not an increase in taxes. Bold, underline, exclamation. Last time I did this, a guy walked in a minute later and was like, "You're increasing my taxes." Everyone in the room was like, "He just said a minute ago that that is not what is happening." This is not an increase to the tax, the sales tax that you're paying today of 4%. How much are we talking about with these bonds? We have two different projects that are proposing utilizing public funds, and this is where this conversation gets far more serious. We're talking about going into potentially debt to cover needs that we have today. The benefit of borrowing against the resort tax to address those needs today is that you're able to make them happen. The disadvantage to that is you're taking on debt, which has its own impacts. And at the end of the day, that is one of the things you certainly would want to consider as you're moving forward with whether to vote for or against either of these bonds. Let's talk a little bit about the cold smoke housing bond. Specifically, up to $15 million, and the reason they're up two numbers is because they're still being negotiated relative to pricing, and David can touch on this a little bit, but that $15 million is to address utilities and roads, often referred to as horizontal infrastructure. The land is also being negotiated, and that's being done by using 3 appraisals, which I'm sure David will touch on as well in his presentation. Total project costs include the land, horizontal infrastructure, which we just discussed, as well as vertical infrastructure, the sticks and bricks. That project in total is a whopping $220 million. David will touch on that a little bit later.
Only $45 million from resort tax.
Only $45 million from resort tax. That's a good point. What we're talking about right now is $60 million, up to $60 million. The community park bond is up to $6.8 million. And depending on current legislation, as we said, we just got that passed, so that's going to be an amazing thing, assuming the governor assigns it. It will be that $6.8 million with the total project cost of $13.1 million, which was the bid from Jackson Contracting. All right, we're going to pivot over to our trifold here, which we've all been using as a guide as we're going through this process. What you'll see is we'll touch on each of these in our independent presentation. The resort tax can't advocate for the bond ballot initiatives, but we can advocate for the renewal of the resort tax. I would not be standing in front of you today if Big Sky did not have a resort tax, as would neither the board or anyone else in this room discussing this particular topic, but as a steward of the vast majority of Big Sky's public funds, we are here today to ask for your yes vote on the renewal of the resort tax. And I don't even need a show of hands, because I know everyone in this room is going to say yes to that, so we appreciate your vote. Without that renewal of the resort tax, we are not able to address some of these bonded projects. And I would like to turn the mic over to David O'Connor with the Big Sky Community Housing Trust to touch on some of those specifics.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you all for being here tonight. What an amazing crowd we have before us. We've done several of these events with what we thought was really good attendance, but you guys have really changed the standard with what we've got before us here. And I'm David O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the Big Sky Community Housing Trust. And I've been in Big Sky a few years, and one of my favorite parts of this community is that we do this. We have an ability and resources to be able to get together and make big decisions that have big impacts and do so together by talking things out. So I'm really grateful to be able to have this opportunity tonight. And then listening to Megan from the Chamber describe the Chamber's role in this is especially important to me and to the Housing Trust. She was describing how the Chamber is often a convener and collects resources and people to bring together in a room and address tough problems on behalf of the community. And that, folks, is how we got a community housing trust. It was that exact same process that the Chamber of Commerce embarked on in 2010 to try to address what is generally perceived to be Big Sky's greatest challenge and remains so today, the challenge of being able to afford to live here. Through that process, by 2019, the Housing Trust was created and embarked on programs and developments that we worked to try to address this problem. So this is the biggest one we have embarked on to date, and we'll talk about that now. So, as the Housing Trust was starting in 2019 to assemble different resources and ideas, we quickly identified that there's kind of two things that a housing organization can look at. We can create new housing, or we can work with the housing that's already here. We embark on doing both. Programs like Rent Local and Good Deeds that the Housing Trust does really deal with existing housing that's already here. Can we convert and then protect the use of as many homes as possible to reserve for full-time year-round residents living here in the workforce? But then there's also creating housing. It's much more complicated, expensive, and time-consuming, but enables us to deliver on the mission we're trying to deliver on much more quickly with many things at once. So we started this idea of looking around the community in 2019. Where might we find land that's suitable for this? We'll talk a little bit about some of that criteria, but that's sort of how we ended up here today. So just to get you orientation, it's a bigger screen than usual, I can normally point, but across the top is Highway 64, the Big Sky Spur Road. The square kind of at the top in the center is the hardware store. Powder Light is off to the right. The Riverview apartments on the other side of the road are also in gray. So the buildings with the red roofs would be 264 apartments, studios 1s and 2s. And then across the stream and over down into that little bowl in there would be 125 single-family homes, attached and detached. We're still kind of working out what designs would be kind of in the very beginning of those processes. But the idea is to bring to the community both rental and ownership opportunities across a variety of incomes, to open up the opportunities for people who work here to decide if they'd like to make their home here and how they would like to do that. So this is our first opportunity to provide a multiple of opportunities to residents at the same time. The timeline we're shooting for is, again, fairly ambitious, but if the bond passes and we can acquire the land, we would close on that by the end of 26, commence infrastructure construction in 27, start vertical construction in 28, and hopefully be starting to occupy by maybe the end of 28 is a little optimistic, beginning of 29, be completed or so by 2032. We'd look to build in 3 phases. We would hope to build a little bit of each portion in each phase. Details like that are still a little ways off, given that we're not quite yet in possession of the land, but that's sort of what we're shooting for. And we're following a model that's really common for organizations like ours. Many communities, if not most communities at this point, have some sort of housing organization or apparatus. Sometimes it's involved with municipal government, sometimes it's standalone like ours. Bozeman has 4 or 5 different organizations. It's a mix of both. But if you look through any of those organizations, choose your choose your community and pick whatever project. Most of those projects look like somehow the land and the infrastructure was brought in, and that's what brings the affordability. That's what reduces the overall cost of the project. Most cities are able to do this pretty easily because cities, especially if they've been cities for a while, tend to accumulate land, and they can bring forth the old bus barn or an old school property or tax foreclosures or whatever. Cities accumulate land. We're a very young community. Even if we were incorporated, we just haven't had enough time to do that yet. So our community doesn't have the ability to say, hey, here's 17 acres you can build an apartment on, or so on and so forth. Anything that we start with, we have to purchase at retail, because that's one of the neat features of being a young community. So, but we're trying to replicate that exact same financial idea. It's really pretty simple. You reduce the cost, it enables you to sell for less. So by taking the land and the infrastructure out of the formula, so to speak, it enables us to then start to overcome those rapidly escalating construction costs and deliver a product that people can afford. So here's some of the milestones the Housing Trust has been on. Again, we started in 2019 with our Meadowview condos, you may be aware of, kind of above the softball fields. That was 52 condos, sold income qualified, deed restricted. It's been a really successful model for us so far. We've turned over 8 of those. The resale model works. So again, we're trying to follow an established process and do more of that. And then you can see kind of along the line, we've done various other things. I won't dwell on too much, but the point I want to illustrate is Cold Spoke is a step in a process for the Housing Trust. We're trying to build a ladder. Think of a ladder with multiple rungs, and if you enter the community, you start on one of the rungs of that ladder, but our lives are not static. We raise families, we grow as families, we grow in our jobs, all of those things, and unless we have a housing setup in the community that accommodates for that, what we're doing is ending up chasing people out as soon as they become successful. So we have kind of 2 rungs on the ladder right now. We have Riverview Apartments. That is a pretty low income, restricted for this community. That's at kind of the first rung of the ladder. And then a little bit more than halfway up, we've got Meadowview condos, but that's it. So if you're trying to transition through your life and stay in this community and keep contributing to the community in all the ways that this room illustrates, we don't really have a path for that. So that's what the Housing Trust is really overall trying to accomplish, so that if someone arrives in this community, maybe starts as a seasonal employee in employer-attached housing, and then they decide they want to stay, and they spend a few years in something else they can afford, meet somebody, raise a family, have kids in the school, maybe want to trade up to a home. The more that person spends in this community, the more valuable they become to all of us for all the things that we're trying to do today. And so it seems counterintuitive to have a cliff where somebody falls off of, and we say, okay, great, thanks for building your life here, but this is as far as you get. Now take all those skills and move on to another community. So we're looking to retain more of the talent that we're building in this community to keep contributing to what we're doing. Okay, so what do we look for if we're going to go out and look for an opportunity like this? We surveyed every piece of land we could find around the community. We're looking kind of for various things. Here's an idea of what some of those things are. What are the boxes that we need to check? It has to be for sale, and it has to be buildable, first of all, right? We're going to use for this project, the community, the voters in 2020 did what I think is the smartest thing we ever did. We reserved some of the water capacity of the plant expansion for affordable workforce housing. We said we're going to use resort tax to increase the plant's treatment ability and their capacity, but some of that new water has to be set aside for this. So we're going to use that water on this project, but in order for us to do that, it is substantially advantageous if we choose a piece of land that is already adjacent to all that infrastructure, so that we can tie into that as efficiently as possible. So that's one of the boxes we've got to check. It's got to be appropriately zoned or able to be, and it's got to be able to be fully entitled. We are talking about purchasing land with public money. We don't really have a risk tolerance that we can bring to that. We can't really take a risk that it may or may not be approved, that it may or may not be able to be built on. We really can't close until it is shovel ready. And so that's one of our boxes we need to check also. This property has to be able to be taken all the way through that process before we buy it, because we just simply don't have any risk that we can take with that. The resulting product has to be 100% available to anybody on a Big Sky paycheck. We'll have income qualifications, but that is the only workforce requirement. There is no reservation for any one employer over another. Kind of my perspective on that, it's a question that we get a lot, and I look at it, I guess, from the other side. I don't really particularly have a preference where anybody works. We're not really looking at our constituency as entries on somebody's balance sheet or an asset for some company or another or something like that. We're trying to house people, and people are complicated, and they don't really arrange themselves that easily into boxes that easily. And people have a tendency of meeting other people and becoming friends, and who knows where each one of them work and that sort of thing. For us, the question of where somebody works, it's as long as they are working for a Big Sky business, that is the standard for us, and it is 100% open, again, with income qualifications to anybody working for one of those businesses. And then I guess the last, two things I would last touch on with that. We need to find a piece of land that enables dignity in housing. We're not fans of, and as a community, I think I can speak for all of us, the values and ethics are not that we put this as an afterthought somewhere. Like it's not an us or them, it's us and then it's our workforce. We are all us. And so we're looking for a piece of land that enables access to amenities, services, retail, transportation, transit, all of those things, just like any of us would be looking at any of the homes that we're looking at as well. And then lastly, the valuation, and that's also, we're talking about a significant amount of money. This would be the largest single spend resort tax has ever done. $45 million for a land purchase, $15 million for the infrastructure installation. Where did we come up with those numbers is certainly a very valid and common question. There's questions about who's, Lone Mountain Land is selling the land. They're the most well-heeled company in town, however you may want to spin that. And again, I come back at that. For me, I'm less concerned. It is 100 acres I can build on that checks all these other boxes. My greatest concern about bringing community funds to that is that it's appraised. It is independently valued. I'm less interested in what the seller thinks it's worth or what we think it's worth or anybody. I'm really leaning heavily on licensed appraisers. And so we've had 3 appraisals done. The seller, Lone Mountain Land, had one done. The Housing Trust had one done. And Resort Tax had one done as well. So we really tried to err on the side of caution to validate that value. The average of those came in, I think, at 46.2. As Danny said, we're still working with Lone Mountain Land and negotiating on the terms of that arrangement. I don't have the final purchase price yet, but I am pretty confident that that will be a little bit less than what you're seeing up on the screen anyway. And then the infrastructure amount, that's actually not a negotiated amount, that'll be an actual cost. That'll be a GMP contract that just pays the invoices that come in. So there's not any chance of keeping an overage or anything like that. All right, so this is just an illustration a little bit of why we are having this discussion. Why did we tackle housing? Why did the chamber look at this way back when? What does this problem look like for this community? And on this, I think I'm probably largely preaching to the choir. But on the left-hand side, you'll get an idea of even just since 2019 what property values have done, both in condos and single-family homes. They've at the very least doubled. And in 2019, if you were here and you recall, things felt pretty damn unaffordable back then. And then they took an exponential reach that I don't think any of us really saw coming. And then how many homes and of what type? We determined that, as most organizations like us, we engage a consultant to do a document called a housing needs assessment that takes into account all sorts of data points, jobs creation, Bureau of Labor Statistics, wage data from the state, surveys from both employers and employees, and all of these things to go in the hat to try to help us determine what kind of housing do we need and how much does it need to cost, what would fill the need for the community. And that's where these numbers here come up with. In 2023, it was our last iteration of that, we are 1,354 homes short of what our best guess is of workforce that would like to live here if they could but can't afford to, or can't one way or the other. Of that 1,354, 1,100 of those need to be priced below where the current market is. Basically what we've identified, 80% of our current workforce today, at least, can't afford to participate in the current market in the town they're working to build. And that's what we are looking to rectify. With everything that we've done so far, and by most assessments, the Housing Trust has gotten a lot accomplished in a very short time. But with the numbers we've gotten here, with everything we feel we've been able to do, 49, 13, 18, 7, that still leaves us very, very significantly short. This, being able to build multiple homes at one time, a development like this, whether it's this one or any other, this method is the only way we're going to even begin to start getting caught up. Okay, if you've ever worked with housing at all, you know the rainbow graphic. Again, this helps to illustrate the income of our community, and I want to introduce you to the term, if you haven't heard it already, the missing middle. We are trying to address missing middle housing, and this illustrates why that's missing middle. So over to the left, on the lowest end of our wage scales in the community, there's actually federal and state assistance. The Riverview apartment building we just opened was built with a federal low-income housing grant. That's a limit of, it can't be any higher than 60% of the average. We don't actually have a whole lot of workforce whose incomes are at that range, because the unfortunate reality is the cost of living is high enough in this community that incomes below that are presenting all sorts of other problems of being able to exist here. Most of our workforce really is in the 100 to 140% of average range. Once you get above, in this community, it's like 250 or 300% of average, you can afford the market, right? We've got about 6% of our workforce in that range. So the vast majority of our workforce is right in the middle. There is help for them on the left in federal and state government, or help for folks on the left of that. There's help for folks on the right in the market. If you are in the middle, the help for you is missing. You can see how that term comes up. That's why that's the missing middle. People also tend to be sort of in the middle of their careers, in the middle of their lives, in the middle of raising their families, in the middle of their income potential, all of those things. It's a missing middle for sort of more reasons than one. And this is why we're addressing this so much, is it is a segment of our workforce that has no help. Up until 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the assumption, and it was reality in most communities, that people in that income range could afford to purchase or rent their own home. That math is broken. That's just no longer true, certainly in this community, and it's not true in a lot of communities. So that's why we're addressing where we're addressing. Lastly, I'll leave you with a couple of QR codes. We have two major lists going at this point. If you're interested in either of these opportunities, we've just got one list for if you're interested in renting, one for owning. You can add yourself to both lists. There is no cost or commitment in any way to add yourself to either of these lists. We are a couple of years away from being to the point of figuring out who's going to live here and all those kinds of things. But once we are, this is where we're going to go, is to these lists. So I would encourage you to add those. And then also any other opportunity we come up with, whether it's a one-off or there are other things that cross our path that could be affordable, we would also go out to these lists also. So I strongly encourage everybody to get on them. And with that, for my part, just to talk about what would happen with a for vote and what would happen with an against vote. For a for vote, we've kind of outlined the timeline. We'll proceed with this project. The Housing Trust, we're already even starting to think about what might be the next thing 5 or 10 years down the road. So we will continue down the road and down the path that we've been working on and trying to address that need and really take a chunk out of that need and start to catch up. If we don't, we certainly would not be involved in this project. What would happen to this land is really a question that Low Mountain Land would answer. There would not be the availability of water. The affordable housing water that would be assigned to this is contingent upon the Housing Trust owning that land. So it would be some market rate development of large scale homes at a much lesser density would be what I would assume would happen on that land. And then we would go back to square one. The need for a project like this to address the need that we've illustrated won't change. We'll still need to come back to you with a major neighborhood that we want to build. It will just be 5 or 8 years down the road. And certainly my assumption is that it will be considerably more expensive. So that's my motivation for wanting to get this done, especially right now. I wish we had purchased this land or something like it 10 years ago when everything was far less expensive. We weren't, as a community, in a position to be able to do that. But I think delay, my sense is delay from here anywhere forward is just going to exacerbate that more. So look forward to answering any questions either in the Q&A or afterward. And with that, I will introduce Whitney Montgomery from BSCO.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just first start by saying thanks to the Chamber and Waypoint for hosting this event, but more importantly, thanks to each of you for being here. If you're like me, you had to ice your knees after skiing today, so you could still be home icing your knees or doing something else, but you chose to be here. And Tammy, I just messed up your slideshow.
Down arrow.
Thank you. So while Tammy's figuring that out, I also want to do a shout out for Danny Burchwell. Not only is Danny right now overseeing the day-to-day management of resort tax, leading the efforts on this resort tax bond, he's back and forth to Helena, working with the state legislative bodies to advance legislation that benefits our community. And Danny, thank you. This town is very fortunate to have you here and for all you do. So we're going to talk about the community park bond, which is one of the 3 ballot initiatives. And how we got to this place, I want to explain. I think it's important that everyone understand. So in October of 22, which is 6 months after base opened, BSCO decided to do a series of community engagement workshops to get feedback of what you, the community, wanted BSCO to focus on next. There were several key areas of focus. One was a pool, an aquatic center. And that's a huge project. It will cost millions and millions of dollars. We decided we would hold off on that, but in the 3-year strategic plan that was created after those community engagement workshops, there was a commitment to do a feasibility study for an aquatic center. So that will happen in the next year and a half. Madeline and her team will do, I'm sure, a great job in figuring that out. But that was one point. The second point was the community asked for more trails. We're always expanding trails at BSCO. I think since that time we've added 12 miles of trails. We're working to add more miles of trails by partnering with Lone Land Company and the Big Sky Resort for some other easements that we hope to bring to conclusion soon, and to continue to add to the trail system here. The third area was around parks. There was a desire for an additional park, and there was a desire to fix the community park. And I say fix, because I mean it works, right? But if you go out there and play pickup soccer, you know the challenges of that athletic field. And so what we focused on of all those priorities were trails and the community park. There will be a new park eventually. It's not part of this bond. If you drive up Ouzel Falls Road and you look off to the right before you get to Firelight, there's a big sign. And we were donated 4.5 acres from Lone Land Company and 1.5 acres from the South Fork Phase 4 homeowners for a total of 6 acres to build a new park. That will happen eventually, but it is not part of this bond. Now, as I said, all the feedback went into a strategic plan that BSCO is about halfway through, much to my chagrin. Because I was thinking after base open, I could go focus on my ski turns, learn how to do things better. Instead, it was back to work to raise money and come up with these projects. Just kidding. This has been a lot of fun. And it's involved the entire community. And I feel really, really good about where we are. So if the pointer works, if it maybe doesn't, so I'm just going to use this pointer. So what I want to do is just go through this park rendering so you can understand all the things that BSCO is focused on doing in this project. Some of this has already been done with money that we've previously fundraised for, and the rest will be finished hopefully with this bond. So in this lower right-hand corner, you see these 3 circles, and that represents Camp Big Sky. Camp Big Sky currently is where those 2 sand volleyball courts are, and it's been a great resource for this community. We serve an average of 110 families a year, but we know we need to do more for that in the future. So part of the reason for moving camp over to the side is to make it, to isolate it from the rest of the park, so the camp counselors can keep their eyes on those little kids running around, and so we can serve more families in the future. It also frees up space in the park. The little brown square there is the maintenance facility. This was something that BSCO has been trying to do for a long time. Our maintenance team worked out of an unfloored, unheated building for years. This gives them adequate space to maintain the equipment needed to maintain parks and trails. And then on the second floor, we put in 2 nice apartments, 3-bedroom each for BSCO staff. We have 6 folks living there now, and they're happy as clams to be there. Next to the maintenance building is the new mini adventure playground. It opened last June, It serves kids ranging from age 1 to 71, and I've seen a lot of older kids out there playing in that park, and it's great. Grace Young is raising her hand as somebody who's done that too. But it's really fun to see how much that playground is used. Again, moving left, you see 2 sand volleyball courts. To the left of that is the skate park. That was also opened last year. We doubled the size of it. Above the skate park is a paved pump track. It's been highly utilized since it opened. And above that is a mountain bike jump line. For those of you folks who want to catch big air or just learn how to catch air, that's what the jump line is for. And that will be built in the future. Again, moving left, you see the soccer field. It's an enlarged soccer field. That field is used by the Big Sky Football Club. It's also used for pickup soccer that BSCO manages. It's highly, highly used. It will be enlarged to serve more people. To the left of that is we're going to take one of the softball fields and make it a multi-use field. You say, why multi-use? Everything in this world ought to be multi-use, but it's not. But what we want to do with it, we can enlarge it so it can also be, it will be used for softball, but baseball, which is a growing sport here in Big Sky for both youth and the high school, can use it. You see an outline of an 11v11 soccer field, so it can also serve more kids playing soccer. To the left of that is the other softball field, which will be completely redone as well. All 3 of these fields will be natural grass. We looked long and hard at doing synthetic fields, and that's one way to guarantee an extended playing season in this climate, because you can move the snow off of the synthetic fields. We got a lot of feedback from community members that from an aesthetic standpoint, from an injury standpoint, whatever, from an environmental standpoint, people preferred grass. So we made the switch. These fields will be significantly better than what we have now. And even though they will be grass, they will drain better. We'll be able to move the snow off of them. We can extend the playing season, maybe not as much as a synthetic field, but it will be a nice change. To the left of that are the racket courts. There are 8 dedicated pickleball courts, 2 dedicated tennis courts. Those are brand new courts. It has a 50-year warranty, which is something that's unheard of in this climate. And we're halfway through the construction on that. We'll finish those this summer. And then coming down below the multi-use field, you see a basketball court, and then across Seaway Drive is the Riverside Recreation play area. So the pavilion, which serves families with picnics, etc. now, will stay. We'll just make it more like a backyard game area. So it'll be a really nice addition. So that's the rendering as a whole. Now the question of why now? Well, this park has been outgrown and it is well loved. If you've ever been down there in the spring, summer, or early fall, there are people everywhere, and it's great. We have car counters in the parking lots. Over 10,000 vehicles pull in there a month. Just with BSCO programs alone, there's 575 users per week. Again, that does not include the football club, the baseball program, anything else, just BSCO programs. And when you put all that together and you see the age of when the park was built, it's time. It's time to renovate it. The playing seasons are very limited. I have a great photo, it's not in this presentation, of Heather Morris and one of her kids trying to move snow in May in 23 off the soccer field so they could play. We need to find better ways to let our youth and adults play on these fields, and so we need to redo all of the fields. And then, of course, with all this increased use, we need to make sure that the fields are safe, the whole park is safe, and most importantly, that it's accessible to everyone. One of BSCO's values is accessibility. From base to all the parks and trails, anyone who lives or visits here should be able to use them. So we want to make sure that can happen. So I talked about the projects that have been completed as we went through the rendering, but the bond will fund the Camp Big Sky relocation and growth, the new basketball court, the racket court, parking lot. The pickleball and tennis players want to have a paved parking lot to keep the mud off the new courts, which we get. New bathrooms, we all need more bathrooms. As mentioned, expand and modernize the athletic fields, 2 new sand volleyball courts. The disc golf course needs some improvements. It was greatly impacted by the water and sewer plant construction, so we want to fix all that. Mentioned the new mountain bike jump line, and then the tennis building, which has been not used for years, needs some work in TLC, and that deck needs to be remodeled. So funding. Danny showed the $13.1 million that's estimated to do the entire park project. We know that's a lot of money. That estimate came from Jackson Contractors about 18 months ago. We're not going to use Jackson. We decided there's a more efficient way to do that financially, and we will contract each bit of the park renovation to different contractors. We'll hire a project manager to help us oversee all of that, and we think we can do more work with the same amount of money by not going for a large contractor, because you pay the general contractor fees and then you pay the subcontractor fees. And so if we can cut out some of that, we think we can do a lot of this work with the money that this bond hopefully will provide. Why public funding? Pretty much all of us in this room, except for Jenny, if she's here, came from somewhere else. And in the places where we came from, parks and trails and recreation was funded through property taxes. And we don't have that here. So going out to the public makes a lot of sense. This is a great public-private partnership because we've already fundraised $5.8 million from resort tax and from individuals to fund the projects that are completed. The bond will help us get over that hump and finish these projects. As Danny underlined, I'm going to underline again, this does not increase your property taxes. We've heard that loud and clear in all these presentations. It's critical, right, that we get that message across to everyone that this is borrowing money from future resort tax collections. And we know that when it only comes online and other businesses grow here, resort tax collection should increase. And so we're counting on that happening and using the ability to do these bonds to pay for these key infrastructure projects now. Obviously, we'll protect green and open spaces. These next 2 points I really want to point to. That's that, we are losing families in this town for a variety of reasons. And one that we hear anecdotally is the lack of amenities for their kids to play athletics. So if this park project helps retain existing families, that would be a great thing for our community. It also will help recruit new families and hopefully retain them. Just think about what new families might do for this community. The school needs several hundred more, not several, 150 more kids to really thrive, right? We've seen a decline in enrollment the last few years. We need to boost that back up and make sure our school can thrive. Think about year-round economy. If we have more year-round residents, we have a better year-round economy, and that's important to this community. So there's so many things about this bond that I believe are beneficial for all of us in this community as we look to the future. So what all this means in terms of the vote. A vote yes means we can modernize and complete the renovation of the community park for this generation and the generation behind us. It also provides the funding for things like bathrooms and paving the parking lots. A vote no means the park probably won't change much. The projects that have been completed will stay there, and it would take a long time to secure funding to do the rest of the projects, and the feedback that we've gotten from you all is fix the damn park. So we're working to do that, and this bond will help that. It also will threaten the livability and year-round sustainability of our community. So I want to say thank you. And before handing it over to Dustin with the school, Danny mentioned the last day to register to vote is April the 7th. If you're not sure if you're active, please go to votemontana.gov. It's very simple to do. You click on, you go to that website, put in your name, your address, it pops up, tells you whether you're active or not. Please double check, because you will not get a ballot if you're not active in that. If you have any questions, Tammy Essenson has become the mastermind of all things elections, so please contact her. Because I've had folks even tonight say, hey, I'm going to be out of town when the ballot is mailed on April the 18th, and the ballot has to be returned by May the 6th. How do I get my ballot? So we need to work as a community to make sure that you get your ballots and can vote. Your vote is your voice. And with that, I'll introduce Dr. Shipman.
So it just dawned on me why they asked me to go last. I'm not going to underline it and bold it, but what I'm going to talk about is going to raise your taxes. But what I will underline and bold, not very much. So I'm Dustin Shipman, I'm the superintendent of Big Sky School District, and we have a small levy on the ballot this year for $300,000 exclusively around employee housing, either infrastructure or benefits. And where this comes from is there's currently a bill making its way through the legislature, and it's taken a long time for the legislature to really understand that we have various housing costs across the state of Montana. So, a student in far east Montana where, a 4-bedroom house might cost $25,000, they're worth the exact same amount of money that our student is worth here in Big Sky. So, is what the legislature is about to do is pass a bill that will allow us to gather 6% of our general fund, which is about $300,000, in perpetuity exclusively for housing, or housing benefits for our employees. So as we look at right now on the campus of Big Sky School District, we have two triplexes equaling 6 units, equaling 12 bedrooms. So those were built in 2020, started in 2020, and then first occupancy in the spring of 2021, fall of 2021. Those have been full the entire time that we've had those. So is what the district is proposing this year, and I'll preface this with, the trustees never really want to go to the ballot with something that's going to increase taxes unless it's a direct impact to the students and to the teachers. So we had a lot of conversation about this. So we're asking the voters to approve $300,000 in perpetuity exclusively for housing. So in the first year of that, we're going to use that. We have phase 2 of our housing project right now in process. We're working with the HOA and working to get everything final so we can have them up and ready to move into in October. And it's going to be 6 kind of cabins like this that we're working with a company out of Great Falls to build. So they're right now, we'll be hopefully able to have occupancy in those in October. Moving forward after this year, so we have the rest of the project funded other than the $300,000. Moving forward, we hope to be able to use that $300,000 for rental assistance, down payment assistance if people want to buy, if one of our teachers or faculty or staff members want to buy a home in the community. So there you can see where the breakout is with the taxes. So on a $3 million home, it's going to increase your taxes less than $10 a month. That said, within the year, the school district's going to have probably $15 million of debt coming off of the books for taxes. So we're separate from the resort tax kind of presentation that was given earlier. We have a lot fewer slides, and really we have a lot fewer zeros. So, I would just encourage you, I'll be here for any kind of Q&A, but we anticipate that, once we get these, 4 to 6 cabins up, they'll be full immediately and full all the time. Thanks.
How many of you have played trivia here at the Waypoint? Show of hands. Quite a few of you. So if you have done trivia before, our quizmaster Jack Reaney over here is the one that you frantically run pieces of paper up to. And I said we were going to be dropping them over here in the whiskey barrel. We're actually going to do this a little bit faster so we can make up some time with you all. Jack is going to reset the stage here for a Q&A with all of the panelists, including myself. And let's take a few minutes. If you need a pen or any paper, Tammy over here has got you covered. This is not a place to ask the easy questions. This is the place to ask the hard questions. We are tired of the easy questions. They are all on your one-pagers over here. So tee them up, folks. We're ready for you.
All right, thank you, Danny. My name is Jack Reaney. If I don't know any of you, I work with Explore Big Sky as a reporter and editor. It's great to see so many people here. I'm going to emphasize this. It's been said a couple times. What an incredible crowd here tonight to learn more about the upcoming election. We did not know exactly what to expect for a crowd, but I would say, Tammy, we can agree this overwhelmed our expectations. So thank you all so much for being here. We're going to try to get you out of here as close to 6:30 as possible. But we also want to take a few minutes to ask some more questions of our leaders of these upcoming ballot initiatives. I will also emphasize what Danny said. If you guys have questions, there are currently 0 questions in the barrel, okay? So you're going to have to trust me and my questions unless you guys want to ask something else. I see some coming up. If you do not have a piece of paper to write them on, please raise your hand and look for Tammy over there by the bar. Tammy's going to get you a piece of paper so that you can bring up your questions. Please ask some questions. All right, well, with that, let's bring back up our leaders here, starting with Danny Bierschwal from Resort Tax, Executive Director number 1. And here comes Executive Director number 2, David O'Connor from the Big Sky Communities Housing Trust. We have a former CEO and now a Director of Special Projects in Whitney, Montgomery, and then a Superintendent, Dr. Dustin Shipman. Thank you all so much for doing this tonight. This is super fun. And I'm going to start you off with a little warm-up question that I did not prep you on. Livable Big Sky had the goal of connecting with all of Big Sky's 3,100 voters. Danny, I think you might be the person to start with here. How is that process going of connecting with all the voters here in Big Sky?
Golly, it certainly hasn't been from a lack of trying to reach all of those folks. We're probably around 500 or 600 people that have been actually engaged with. 3,100 is a lot more than what? What? That's the population of Big Sky.
He knows better.
You're not the quiz master here, Grace. That's Jack. Just joking. We're probably around 500 or 600 folks, so we've got a long ways to go. And if you could just talk to your neighbors, friends, anyone you feel comfortable with, and if you need any support in doing that, like I said, don't care which way you vote. We need more voters to turn out to the polls. So thanks, Jack.
Yeah, if anybody has any thoughts you want to add on that process, go for it. Otherwise, we can move on.
Danny says he doesn't care how you vote. I care how you vote.
Me too.
You can move on.
Thanks, Dustin. Okay, and just staying on that topic quickly, what are the biggest challenges that you guys are finding in educating voters for this upcoming local election? And I think we'll start with David on this one.
I think first and foremost, the misperception that it will raise property taxes, and that it will raise taxes at all, and that it will cost voters, if they vote for it, they'll have to decide, is that something their family budget can handle? The taxes that are going to be raised for this are going to be raised no matter what. It's the existing taxes today. So it's not a change in that. And I think for the housing trust specifically, I think the acquisition of the land has been probably a bigger challenge. The value, as I said, it's the biggest single resort tax spend we've ever made, and I think that's making people pause, as well it should. It's a significant amount of money, and we should be concerned about that. So my best answer to that is I didn't value that myself. I went and asked folks with licenses and that appraise it in this community very regularly. So that's where we came up with that number.
Yeah, Whitney, any from you?
Yeah, the biggest piece that we've experienced is just the conversation around the synthetic fields, whether they be synthetic or natural grass. There's been great support for the community park bond because everybody loves it and uses it. So yeah, we feel good about where we are. I hope we can get it over the finish line.
I'd say the biggest challenge is it's just a lot of stuff on the ballot. Like, holy smokes, you're gonna get 4 here and then a firelight, which, knock on wood, will actually go through this time, but that's a lot of ballot issues, and trying to understand them all and so much information, that's probably been the hardest thing.
Nice. And as we pass it back to Dustin to finish us off on that question, good segue to the firelight topic. Over in the back, Becky Brokey and Jeff Gill are here with Firelight, talking to you. Show of hands, anybody here live in Firelight? Couple hands. All right, keep them up. Anyone know somebody that lives in Firelight? All right, there we go. That's a lot more of us. I'm going to just read a little bit from their one-pager, their information. So last year, some of you may remember, the Firelight community attempted to create a water and sewer district to improve water treatment for the neighborhood by connecting to the Big Sky Water and Sewer District to their new water resource recovery facility. Despite widespread support, many votes in favor, very few votes, if any, against, 0, that's 0 votes against, no votes against. Unfortunately, they fell 1 vote short of the minimum threshold to get that water and sewer district created. I'm going to quote from their one-pager. Voting for the formation of the Firelight Meadows County Water and Sewer District is a critical step to resolving the deficiencies of our septic system, which pollutes the Gallatin River and cannot meet DEQ's new treatment standards. Okay, so please, if any of you have any questions or want more information to share with your friends, please talk to Becky and Jeff back there. They're waving over there behind the bar, and they are going to give you the information that you need. We just wanted to give that a quick plug. Those residents will see it on their ballot. Thanks for your time there. And Dustin, any challenges on educating voters?
I mean, I think we're probably at slightly less of a challenge than my colleagues here on the stage. Ours is really straightforward, and most people understand how schools are funded and how school levies work in communities. The ballot language really outlines it. And we also have direct access to all of our parents, which is a big piece of the Big Sky community.
Awesome. And let's stick with you. So you showed us the cabins that you guys are proposing to build. I want to learn more about the existing on-campus housing that's currently on school campus. Can you tell us how that came together and what have the impacts been?
Yeah, so as I said, those have been in full occupancy either by individual teachers, families, or employees or teachers living together. And that was a significant partnership with Habitat for Humanity and Big Sky Resort Area Tax District and our local voters. So Habitat for Humanity was the general contractor, so to speak, and the Big Sky voters approved, I think it was a $750,000 levy, and BSRAD gave Habitat for Humanity awarded Habitat for Humanity $750,000 for that project as well.
Okay. And overall, I think they've been full occupancy since they opened, right? And what feedback do you hear from teachers?
And we hear really good feedback from teachers. I mean, it's reasonably priced, it's close to school, they're nice units. And the trustees did a really good job when we built those of putting it on a sliding scale so everybody can afford to live there on what they earn.
Great. And as we're going to talk about with Cold Smoke too, we all know that housing is a challenge in Big Sky. Could you share just a bit on how it specifically impacts education here?
Well, I think not just does it give us the ability to recruit and retain teachers, but we see models all over the state of housing that communities have built for their teachers. And it kind of started in oil country right in the Far East. And we've always talked about those places, they have housing to make their community more attractable for educators. We really want to make the community more livable for our educators. And at the end of the day, the more livable, the more comfortable your teacher is, the better off your students are going to be. So, I've had teachers sitting across from my desk that their condo's going up for sale and they don't have any place to move and they got to be out in 30 days. That's a stressful situation, and that's certainly projected into everything you do in your life.
Okay, thank you. All right, while we're on housing, David, let's talk about Cold Smoke here. So, that same situation he's describing could be true for lots of people in Big Sky, I'm sure. First question for you on Cold Smoke is just, can you tell us more about the missing middle? What does that term mean? You showed that rainbow diagram. And I also want you to provide some color to why in Big Sky does the middle extend up to an income of more than $230,000 to be able to afford market rate housing?
Sure. The income levels are they're averages that are issued by county. So there's a Gallatin County average income that's issued every year for every county in the country. 100% of area median income for a household of 2 in Gallatin County for 2024 is about $87,000. And so that's kind of how that's arranged. And then everything that we do when we talk about affordability for housing is some reference point to 100%. So we might say this is affordable to 120% of area median income, or affordable to 70% of it, however that works. But that's sort of where those numbers come from. And so the middle primarily refers to that middle of the income spectrum. If you think of the whole spectrum across all of Big Sky paychecks, right? There's a low end, a high end, and a middle. And the middle part is where we really don't have a lot to offer. It's not nearly enough income to be able to afford to participate in the housing market. So most of those people, if they're staying here full-time year-round, are renting. As Dr. Shipman alluded to, there's a thing that you may be familiar with, we call the Big Sky Boogie. It's when you move 7 times in 2 years. That's, some of us laugh and some others say we live that every day. And that causes tremendous amount of stress and uncertainty and all sorts of negative impacts that, as Dr. Shipman said, kind of manifest throughout the community. And really, this is the middle of our workforce. This is kind of the core. These are the folks that are here full-time, year-round, building our businesses, building our community. And so that's where they're missing. There's not really any help for them in any way. At the lowest end, there's federal help and state help. We built our Riverview apartments. Those are at 60% of that income. That was 25 apartments. We just opened them in September. And here's a good illustration of kind of what's happening in the community as far as incomes go. Right, so we had 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom apartments. The 1 bedrooms we filled right off the bat, like wait list out the door. We've already turned one over, it filled within the day. There's no problem with demand for those small households, right? 2 bedrooms were a little harder. The 3 bedrooms, we had a really hard time filling. It took 3 months or so. And if you think about it, what does a household look like that would fill a 3 bedroom apartment that is making less than 60% of the area income? Well, that's probably a single parent with 2 kids. If there were a second parent and they were working, you'd be way above the income limit to be able to qualify to live there. But if you're at the 60% limit and you have 2 kids, you are most certainly working full-time. You are probably working 2 jobs. You certainly can't afford childcare. You're having a hard time affording groceries or anything else. So we're constructing an economy where single households of 1 are the only households that are really able to thrive here, because that's the only thing that fits the math. And so we're chasing away our families as they are growing, or in some cases as they've been established for 10 or 12 years. Everybody in the room can think of examples of friends that you have or folks that you know, used to see on sidelines or whatever, that are no longer here, and a lot of that was because of affordability. So that's really what we think of as that missing middle. In this community, at the beginning end of the income stream, probably employer-attached housing, that's where dorms and things like that live. And we recognize the importance of those types of housing, absolutely, that's not what we do, but that's definitely an important part of the picture. And then at the upper end, more power to you. If you've been so successful and your career is taken off and you're able to buy a home or a condo, that's great, the system works. It's everybody in the middle, in between, for whom it's not working, and I think we're all paying a price for that.
Great, yeah, and one point of confusion that I think we've heard is regarding who will be eligible to live in Cold Smoke, whether that's apartments or homes. I think some people maybe think it's related to your employer. I know before you said you don't really care who someone works for, but can you just clarify what would make you eligible to live in Cold Smoke?
Sure, we don't have a business license or a city limits, as I think we're all keenly aware. So we need to define what is a Big Sky business, first of all. Well, resort tax, outside of who collects resort tax requires anybody doing business in the community to do a free registration. It takes about a minute with resort tax, and that's really just for head count. So since resort tax is doing that anyway, we use that as a convenient definition for what is a Big Sky business. If you are drawing a full-time paycheck, and that's, I think, I don't remember off the top of my head, I think it's 1,580 hours a year, that allows for full-time employment with 2 months layoff to allow for seasonality. That will define you as a full-time employee. If you have worked for a full-time, or worked for a Big Sky business for a number of years, and it varies by project, and are now retired, you count as workforce.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then one more thing I'm hearing in the community, and this one's a point of tension, is you alluded to this in your presentation, but you know, roughly $45 million purchase from Lone Mountain Land Company certainly has people talking around town. How are you addressing that tension as you go and promote this bond?
Sure, there's a couple different things there. I think, you know, certainly there's trepidation with, you know, purchasing a very large asset from a company that we all perceive as to be pretty well heeled already. And the other part of that, I think, is what is the intrinsic value of that land. We are a community of real estate agents and developers. There's certainly lots of familiarity with how land is valued and things like that. And for me, as I sort of said, I try to sidestep that. I am not a real estate agent or developer or broker or any of those things, and I don't have a strong sense of the intrinsic value of the land. But much as I would do with my own home, if I went to go sell it or if I wanted to go buy another one, I go to an appraiser and lean really heavily on what that is. And that is not just a guy driving by and going, I think it's 45 million. There's a significant amount of pretty complex math that takes into account comparable sales over previous times and lots and lots of other data points that they factor into that. Those appraisals are about 25 pages long with all the data points that are in there. And those are state licensed professionals. So I lean pretty heavily, because to me, I don't have the personal experience to sift through all the noise of what value should be or was or could be or might have been 10 years ago or any of those things. I look to the professional that does have those answers in an empirical, more scientific way, and that's the number that we came to resort tax with. In terms of the seller itself, I mean, the first thing I have to acknowledge is Lone Mountain Land has been a fantastic partner of the Housing Trust. We purchased the land under Riverview from them at about a 12% discount off appraisal, and then we co-developed that site together. They were a great partner with building that. That site actually ran about $1 million over in cost. The Housing Trust doesn't have $1 million to cover cost overage, and this was built with a federal grant that was finite. Lone Mountain just covered it. So they've been proven partners of ours. I certainly do recognize that there's a lot of opinions about how development happens and the pace that it happens and all of those things, and I'm kind of trying to stay out of that a little bit, because to me, it's all about the checklist and the appraised value. And if the United Way owns it, great. If Montana State University owns it, great. If Jack owns it, great. The price is what the appraisal says it is.
Fortunately, I do not.
And that's where I'm gonna buy it.
Thanks.
You did too.
So 45 million plus 15 just for infrastructure. We're looking at a bond that's about $60 million. So Danny, let's talk about resort tax 3% renewal. It sounds like, if I'm understanding correctly, this 3% renewal is the sole thing that's going to make these numbers work. It sounds like the 3% renewal, it won't change resort tax, it just extends resort tax, right? And in addition, it also generally improves BSRAD's ability to use these taxpayer dollars most efficiently, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, sort of a softball question for you here, but why would anyone here not want to vote for the 3% renewal to help extend that?
Well, I would say there's some people that just don't like having a sales tax. I mean, Montana doesn't have a state sales tax, statewide sales tax. Tax is a four-letter word to most people. I personally believe this is the best thing the state of Montana legislature has ever done for local communities. I was just up in Helena and people are bickering all over the place about state dollars and county dollars. This resort tax is an extremely powerful tool. I think there's just some folks that don't necessarily like a resort tax. I will say this, it's a pain in the ass to collect. For a collector, they do get a remittance. I think each business receives, Kristen's at 5% as an administrative check that is cut or admin fee that is part of that process. So that's a negative on that front. And then we're all paying it a little bit. Even tonight when we're buying drinks here, it's intended to be passed along to the tourist so that the residents don't shoulder that property tax burden. But some people just don't like tax, Jack, and I can respect that.
Awesome. And speaking of, the impact of cold smoke, there was a recent bill that has passed, and it is now on Governor Gianforte's desk. 172, I forget if it's a House or a Senate bill. Just talk quickly about the impact of that bill.
That's right. It's so important to this project, and thanks for the T-ball, because I know you wrote something recently in Explore Big Sky about HB 172. The reason that bill is really important is because it's going to allow us to utilize funding that doesn't touch our grant cycle. So our grant cycle is out of that 3% pocket of money and the 1% for infrastructure, now that it has the allowability for us to be able to take debt on and then pay that back using those 1% funds, which we're paying down our last project far faster than we ever thought. The wastewater treatment plant will be paid off in either fall or winter of this year, which was when we would be able to trigger something with the Housing Trust. But HB 172, mission critical. I'm going to take a second and just plug SB 260, which is likely to be going over to the Senate floor tomorrow. And what I would ask everyone in this room to do is go do a little bit of research on SB 260 and write all 50 of the senators, which Jackie Haynes, who I think stepped out briefly here, but she's sitting right there next to Grace, has the list of names. We need your letters to go there for SB 260, which will help to fix some school district issues that we've had over in the Madison Valley, as well as hospital district issues. Plug done.
Awesome, plug done. All right, well, I've got a different kind of softball question. Whitney, with the community park, how you guys like that one? Okay, so Whitney, you've mentioned that if, you've mentioned this in resort tax meetings and whatnot, but if this community park bond for $6.8 million does pass, there will be an adjustment in the way that BSCO approaches the resort tax board with annual asks to fund certain things. So I just want to ask, how would this community park bond improve BSCO's long-term funding and planning versus having to go every year asking for projects, for capital projects?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And so the BSRAD board has asked the nonprofits over time to reduce asking for operational funding, meaning money for salaries, for example, and ask money for capital projects and infrastructure. BSCO has done that in the last number of years. We've not asked BSRAD for operational funding, just capital funding. So if this bond passes, instead of us going for the next 3 years asking for $2.2 million to finish the project, we'll get it all done at once, and we will not ask for capital funding going forward. I'll also say, though, is that this is a very generous community. Philanthropy does a lot for each of us in this room, and we need to be thankful for those that do make those gifts. I mean, businesses like the Hungry Moose, Big Sky Landscaping, the Conoco, right, Lowmount Land Company, the resort, they all make philanthropic gifts to support BSCO, and that allows us to operate the way we do, make everything accessible to the whole community, and have BSCO will not be requesting for 3 years capital funding. Now, we also partner with the Big Sky Trails and Recreation Parks District, which provides funding for maintenance for parks and trails. So we have a business model that's very set, and we think this change of not asking for capital funding for the next 3 years should not have significant impact.
Okay, and then Danny, how does that impact resort tax to know that there's going to be fewer asks from BSCO as one example?
That's one of the reasons that we started that capital improvement plan to begin with, is we, on an annual basis, receive unknown requests in like the $1 to $3 million. And despite the fact that it seems like we have all of the money to be able to accomplish all of these projects that are being requested through our community, we do not. And it's a very difficult decision for board members as they're having to sort through how are we going to even consider a $3 million or $2 million request in the context of programming and mission critical type stuff. So what this allows us and what the CIP allows us is predictability, and that's really important when you're in financial planning.
Great, predictability. Let's talk again, David, about Cold Smoke. $220 million roughly in total, just 60 from resort tax, although we say just 60 million as if it's not a huge number. Where does that remaining $160 million come from?
Sure, from that point, again, we sort of follow a model that looks like any other construction project. We're just trying to remove those first two layers of the land and the infrastructure from that. Once we get past that, the biggest part of the financing to go vertical would be commercial financing. There's going to be, we've got good partnerships with philanthropy. We don't have nailed down exactly what that structure of contribution will look like, but we anticipate pretty robust participation by philanthropy as well. There's other, while there are not really government sources in the form of grants or things like that, there are some low interest loans that Montana has available that we'll be looking to avail as well. So putting, at that point, we're really operating a lot more like a traditional construction project, and money costs money, so we're looking for the least expensive parts or sources of that as we can. Banks will be by far the majority of that, banks plus phased construction, which allows you to use the proceeds from the sales of the initial units to then finance the construction of the subsequent units.
Awesome, thanks. Folks, we asked for questions and you guys came up with questions. Thank you. We have 25 questions in the barrel. So I apologize if we don't get to all of them. These guys are going to hang around, answer questions if you want to go up directly. We do have one that I'll start with for you, Dustin. Here's a question from the audience. Where are the 6 cabins going to be located on the school, and why wasn't the current school housing built with double stories, or why wasn't it built double-storied?
So that was the first, I'll take the second part of that first. So that was the first foray that the district had ever had into the employee housing realm. And with such a valuable partner as Habitat, they kind of drove the whole thing. They had a model, and it just worked. If we could go back, we probably would do some things slightly differently. And then the current housing is going to go on the other side of the tennis courts. If anybody who knows the campus, we have about 30 acres down there. So those are going to go on the other side of the current tennis courts, kind of in the same region where the housing currently sits.
Cool. And while I've got you here, in addition to building infrastructure for housing, what are the other sorts of housing-related initiatives that this general fund levy would help support?
Yeah, I think it'll help support rental assistance, mortgage assistance, down payment assistance if and when needed. We will still have to structure all that out to see how that money flows through to the faculty and staff and to the employee. But the key thing is, like, we have really strict reporting requirements. So that 6% above our general fund has to be allocated for housing in some form.
Awesome. All right. Got a question for you, David. Cold smoke question here. All right. What amounts will Boyne, Cross Harbor, Lone Mountain Land Company, Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks Club, One and Only / Moonlight contribute to Cold Smoke?
Sure, those are all good questions. I don't have specific asks or needs of employers. My worry with that is if an employer contributes a significant amount into this project, we're going to end up right back where we started with employer-attached housing. That contribution is going to come with an expectation that there's some reservation or provision of housing for a certain amount of their employees. And for me, that's exactly what I'm trying to get away from, to avoid that. So while we are extremely well supported by, I don't remember the entire list, but those entities mentioned, the Yellowstone Club and Lone Mountain Land, along with Resort Tax, pretty much funded the down payment assistance program for Meadowview, for example. Lone Mountain is by far our single largest cash contributor every year. The Yellowstone Club Community Foundation is by far our single largest philanthropic contributor. So there are contributions from those entities. You probably just saw Boyne auctioned off the Explorer lift chairs, and the Housing Trust was a beneficiary of that. So we feel pretty well supported by that employer community. I'm pretty reluctant to tie that directly to product because I don't want to imply that I'm going to give something I'm not.
Awesome. We have a bunch of cold smoke questions, so I'm going to give you a couple more. This person is in agreement that we need more housing, but can you speak to the quality of homes that we are inadvertently supporting with this bond?
Sure, and that's not an uncommon question with any project that looks like this in any community, and I think with very good reason. So there are a couple regulatory layers of protection built in terms of the county approvals and subdivision. But other than that, we're in a smallish community. We will build the highest quality we can at the affordability level that we're trying to sell for. I would love to be able to build something that looks like a Spanish Peaks home or something like that and sell it for $400,000. And I don't think I'm going to be able to pull that off. But the best I can say at this point, and we are premature for designs, so I don't have specific answers for you about materials or something that I can show you and say it's going to look like this. I don't own the land yet, so I'm presumptuous by even saying yet, I guess. So we're just not quite there yet in the process. We've got over a year's worth of infrastructure to install as well. But these are issues that are extremely important to us. I've lived here 35 years. I have no desire personally to see things diminish from the community that we've all worked so hard to build. So, unfortunately I don't have a super definitive answer today. There will be lots of eyes looking on what gets built there, some of which are regulatory, some of which are social. And social, I mean the opinion of the community and the desire and the wants of the community are things that are extremely important to us. The last thing, again, I've been here a long time, the last thing I personally want to do is force something on the community it doesn't want, because I plan on living here the rest of my life. But that being said, we will do the absolute best we can with the funds that we've got.
Can you run a public process to?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. When that time does come and we are ready to start making decisions and stuff like that, we plan on hosting several events kind of like this, maybe a little bit less talking from the stage, but more like designs around the room and tell us what you think and what's important to you and all those types of things that we do very much want to know. I just, I'm not asking them yet because I don't have a place to put them yet, but as soon as we are, that's extremely important to us as well.
Great, and a quick two-parter for you. Of the 125 homes, are they deed restricted, part one? Part two, can they be rented by owners?
Okay. Time we got. So anything that the Housing Trust does is going to be deed restricted. Anything that uses the housing specific water, the Housing Trust wouldn't endorse use of that water without being deed restricted. So that's the world we live in. You know, everything that we do has some layer of legal protection on it. It varies a little bit by project because we're trying to build that ladder again. So there's different requirements for different goals, but there is a legal structure under everything, and there will be that we do. Would they be able to be rented? Easy answer, short-term rented, absolutely not, under no circumstances ever. And that is a double prohibition again. That'll be prohibited by the deed restriction specifically, but it's also prohibited by the use of that water. So it's not just us being the stewards of that water and sewer district. Also, in conjunction with resort tax, kind of it has the management over the use of that water. So that wouldn't be permitted under either one of those. Would it be able to be rented long-term? Like if you own it, do you want to rent that out, or would you be able to rent that out to another full-time year-round employee? And probably not. Those rules, again, we haven't really written that yet because it's just a little bit premature. In Meadowview, for example, the owner must reside in Meadowview. They are allowed to rent out another bedroom as long as they are still qualifying workforce, but the owner must reside. Our Good Deeds program, we do allow an owner to own a property and rent it as long as it's to workforce and not short-term, minimum 1-year lease, all of that stuff. My guess, and I haven't run this, our board hasn't picked this up or any of that stuff, but my assumption is that we'll probably run a lot like Meadowview.
Great. Folks, it is 6:42 right now. I know we said this event would go to 6:30, so I first of all just want to thank everyone for their attention. This has been a lot thrown at you, so thank you all for listening so closely. If you have to head out, please feel free. We're going to keep you going for just a few more minutes. There are a lot of cold smoke questions in here, okay? And thank you for asking them. We cannot answer all of them up here. I'm not censoring your questions, I promise. There's just a lot in here. Please ask David your questions after this. He would be more than happy to speak with you. Whitney, I have a question for you. It's pretty obvious to see how housing contributes to livability, right? It's a place that you live. It's maybe the most important factor in making a place livable. But talk about how community park infrastructure really helps livability as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And I'd like to tell a quick little story, if I could. The fundraising for the racket courts, there was I see Mike Scholes over there, Mike and a few others really led the effort to do the fundraising for the racket courts. One of the major donors of the racket courts decided to invest in those because he found community playing pickleball after living here for a short time. He's now a full-time resident, and he said if it wasn't for pickleball, he may have left. We've had people who go to base, new families, that go to base and say, same thing. We moved here, we didn't know anybody. Base provided a safe place for my kids to play, place for the parents to meet others about going to fitness classes, and so it adds a lot to livability. There are also tons of youth and adults in this town that like recreational athletics, and most of those are done outdoors in the summer, and so it gives them a place to be as well.
Awesome. Danny, we had a quick question just on the extension of this, Danny, sorry. The extension of the resort tax. Someone was wondering, first of all, when does this extension last until, if the 3% is renewed? And also, what does it look like if voters say no? It's 2 years, correct, before you can bring this back to the ballot? Or if not, correct me.
I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong and I misspoke on that. We can go right back the next year. So to address that. What was the question? 2065?
Yeah, the length
2065.
of extension.
2065.
Cool. I've been handed a note by my producer. There are project open houses for more detailed questioning for David and Whitney. April 17th it's at base, but we're talking about the community park, right?
Correct.
And then April 18th, Cold Smoke, and that is hosted at.
That's over at the new Riverview campus, the two buildings closest to the resort. There's a community room, and we'll meet right there in the parking lot, and then we can sort of look and point at everything we're talking about.
Sounds great. All right, folks, we're at 6:45. I think we're going to move to close here. Again, if you have any questions that are outstanding, as I know there are many, please come up and talk to our panelists. Let's just give a quick round of applause for all of them here. And before we finish, an even louder round of applause for all of you for coming here to learn more. I will plug Explore Big Sky. If you would like to learn more, please follow along with our town crier, with our newspaper, our website. We are covering these topics. We want to make sure people are educated. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. Ballots are coming in 2.5 weeks, so get ready.